Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I have two questions. Can I provide an update on the Kyle Rittenhouse case, including an analysis of the verdict? And did Anthony Huber believe that Kyle Rittenhouse was an active shooter? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first I'll look at the verdict and offer my analysis on that. Then I'll move to the question of Anthony Huber. On August 25, 2020, Kyle Rittenhouse was in Kenosha, Wisconsin during protests that were occurring because of the Jacob Blake case. Rittenhouse was carrying a rifle. He shot and killed a man named Joseph Rosenbaum after being chased by Rosenbaum. Moments later, he shot and killed a man named Anthony Huber after Huber chased him and struck him with a skateboard. Just after this, Rittenhouse shot a man named Gage Grosskreutz after he pointed a pistol at Rittenhouse or in his direction. Rittenhouse was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and first-degree reckless homicide, attempted first-degree intentional homicide, and 2 counts of first-degree reckless endangering safety. He was also charged with possession of a weapon by someone under 18, but that charge was dismissed. During the trial, which took place in November of 2021, the prosecution did a fairly good job at providing a defense. I think they forgot what team they were on. For example, the prosecutor pointed out how Joseph Rosenbaum had been committing crimes like arson not long before chasing Rittenhouse, and even went as far as saying he would have prosecuted Rosenbaum if Rosenbaum had survived. The trial was really about the interpretation of blurry videos of the events in Kenosha. The prosecution claimed that Kyle provoked the 3 men, thereby forfeited the right to self-defense. The defense said there was no provocation. The case really hinged on whether or not the jury believed that Kyle Rittenhouse had pointed his weapon at the 3 men, and whether or not the men believed Rittenhouse was an active shooter. On November 19, 2021, Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty of all charges. In my opinion, it was pretty clear that the charges never should have been filed against Rittenhouse in the first place, because he appeared to be acting in self-defense, and there was no clear evidence of provocation. Despite this, it was important to some that Rittenhouse be tried to make a political statement. The trial became a referendum on gun rights, the definition of self-defense, and what is permissible during a protest. The facts really didn't matter to many people who had strong political beliefs about the meaning of the case. Certain people were fearful and hopeful about the trial's outcome. Fearful in the sense that it may be against their political beliefs, and hopeful in that it may reinforce those beliefs. What does the verdict actually mean? This is a tricky question. It has different meanings for different people. I think what the not guilty verdict actually means is that the jury was able to see past the political nonsense and make a decision based on the evidence that was available. They made a decision based on what was presented to them. They made the right call, in my opinion. I think what many people believe the not guilty verdict means is quite different. I think for some people on the left, the verdict implies that the people who are protesting or rioting, depending on one's point of view, need to refrain from attacking people. Simply being armed at a protest does not constitute provocation. It's not okay to simply chase and attack armed people. I think for some people on the right, the verdict is viewed as a victory because it upholds the right to self-defense. Even in a situation where a person inserted himself into a conflict, this verdict might make protesters or rioters think twice before violating the rights of others. Essentially, the verdict may be viewed as a restriction by the left and a validation by the right. In the end, many people will look at the verdict as a victory for conservative values. I think what's so interesting about this case is that it became this referendum when it should not have. The outcome of the criminal trial should not be interpreted as supporting or refuting a political belief. The verdict in a criminal trial is based on whether a defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The verdict should not be thought of as an opinion about whether Rittenhouse was right or wrong. The verdict is restricted to guilty or not guilty. The jury could have believed he did something morally wrong. They could have even believed he did something criminally wrong, but they decided he was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Many people believe that O.J. Simpson was guilty of murder in reality, but he was found not guilty by a jury. Other than Norm Macdonald, No one really believed that murder was made legal by the not guilty verdict in the O.J. Simpson case. A verdict is about a particular case. Again, it doesn't necessarily extend to the entire world. I think this case really demonstrates how politically divided the United States is. This was a relatively clear-cut case of self-defense. It wasn't a good test case to become polarized. There wasn't a lot of murky area to explore and make into a political topic. But in this environment, each side is latching on to anything that can possibly support their point of view. Each side is looking to confirm the other side is really evil and terrible. The political belief comes first, the facts come in second, or more likely, they never come in at all. Now moving on to the issue of Anthony Huber. Again, Anthony Huber was shot and killed by Rittenhouse. He was the second person Rittenhouse shot and killed. One of the items I heard many times during the trial was that Anthony Huber believed that Kyle Rittenhouse was an active shooter. Because he believed this, and because he acted on that belief, this may have led to Gage Grosskreutz inserting himself into the situation. Some people claim that if Huber believed this active shooter story when he attacked Rittenhouse, somehow this meant that Huber was innocent and Rittenhouse was guilty. This is exactly the type of thinking that makes me worry that critical thinking skills are being eradicated or otherwise vanishing. The truth is that Huber could have thought that Rittenhouse was an active shooter, and Rittenhouse could have thought that Huber was an assailant. Both of those items can be true at the same time. If Huber believed that Rittenhouse was an active shooter, that does not destroy Rittenhouse's right to self-defense. The false belief that Huber maintained would not negate Rittenhouse's correct belief. For that matter, even if Rittenhouse was incorrect about the intention of Huber, if he reasonably believed Huber was trying to kill him or seriously harm him, he was allowed to defend himself. The standard that often applies in these situations is, what does somebody reasonably believe? Even if both parties reasonably believed the other was a threat, the right to self-defense is retained. I believe that in the moment when Rittenhouse had to decide whether to shoot or not, he reasonably believed Huber was a threat. After all, Huber did strike him with a skateboard. The question is, could Huber have reasonably believed that Kyle was a threat? Is this a situation where both people were being reasonable? So really kind of a terrible accent. I'll give Huber the benefit of the doubt and assume that he did believe Rittenhouse was an active shooter, but again, the question is, was his belief reasonable? Let's take a look at the background of Anthony Huber and some of the influences on him. Huber was an acquaintance of Jacob Blake. Again, it was the wounding of Blake by the police that led to the protest in Kenosha in the first place. Huber and Blake were not good friends, but they had smoked marijuana together. Huber was upset that Blake had been shot. Huber believed that the police were to blame, that the shooting was not justified. The issue of firearms is hotly debated in the United States. No doubt Huber was influenced by the media at some level. The media often portrays guns and gun owners as dangerous. They use incorrect terminology when referring to weapons to make it seem as though those weapons are designed for some nefarious purpose. For example, the media often incorrectly refers to rifles as assault rifles or assault-style rifles. Anthony Huber may have been conditioned to think of somebody carrying a rifle as a political enemy or inherently dangerous. It was clear Rittenhouse was not a protester and not a rioter. Therefore, in that group, Rittenhouse stood out and could have been considered an enemy. Huber had bipolar disorder. He had a history of heroin and psychedelic use as well. He also lived in a stressful environment, including living in a house that had layers of garbage accumulated inside of it. Huber had a criminal history. In 2012, he threatened his brother with a knife if he did not clean the house. He then choked his brother for 10 seconds before leaving. Huber was convicted of strangulation and false imprisonment. He violated the terms of probation and was sent to prison in 2017. When he was released from prison, he returned home, but was soon back in prison after being charged with disorderly conduct after kicking his sister. All these factors came together on the evening of August 25, 2020, so all of these experiences that Huber had. Huber had seen Rittenhouse prior to attacking him with the skateboard. He had probably already formed a negative image of Rittenhouse. When the crowd started yelling something like "stop him" or "get him," Huber jumped into action. He joined other people in pursuing Rittenhouse. Huber, of course, ended up striking Rittenhouse with a skateboard, prompting Rittenhouse to respond with a more effective weapon. In light of Anthony Huber's history and perception, did he reasonably believe Rittenhouse was an active shooter? I think he did believe it, but his belief was not reasonable. I think this is a great example of how a series of false beliefs can lead to bias, and that bias can lead to the development of another false belief. Huber was primed to make bad decisions. He had a history of impulsivity. It only took a few random people yelling something to make him attack another human being. Rittenhouse was not shooting anyone when Huber attacked him. Rittenhouse was actually running toward the police line. How did Huber know to whom the crowd was referring? Why did he believe the crowd? This wasn't exactly a crowd that had demonstrated a high amount of respect for the law. Huber was willing to attack somebody based on the random yelling of a few people in the middle of a chaotic environment. What lessons can we learn in this case? I have two lessons here. Lesson number one, the courtroom should be a place where evidence is considered, not political ideology. The true meaning of this verdict might be to restore some level of faith in the judicial system. Lesson number two, politics do not always reflect reality. Overarching political beliefs are fine, but their application in any specific instance may be questionable. Political beliefs are not evidence, not information. They do not have value in the sense of determining the truth. Everything is filtered through the lens of someone's own experiences, through their own bias. If a person allows themselves to form strong beliefs against one group or for another, in the moment of action, that tendency may backfire. Those are my thoughts on the case of Kyle Rittenhouse and the not guilty verdict. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.